Hi everyone, Alex Tardy here with Weather Echo. We've got an insight for you, and it is monsoon season. But first, we're going to have to deal with a significant major heat wave with record high temperatures across much of the West, centered on the Great Basin and the Rockies. So once that sets up, it's going to also trigger the monsoonal flow, and that's the time of the year we usually see it, but this looks significant, both the heat wave and the monsoon flow to produce thunderstorms. Let's take a look. These are the highlights. So the target zone for the heat wave, and it's an extended heat wave, a couple weeks, is the Great Basin and the Rockies. So that's where the heat dome is going to set up and be persistent. Now this will bring a high wildfire danger to all the West. And now we're getting to the time when the fuels in the upper elevations are drying out too. Haven't seen rain for a couple months. So the monsoon will kick in, and that's beneficial to fire weather overall. Brings up humidity, the mugginess, but lightning strikes. And lightning strikes occur whenever you have thunderstorms, and it doesn't matter if it's raining. If the fuel is dry, you can still get wildfires. We could see monsoon moisture going all the way to the west coast. Now, how's that going to happen? Elevated thunderstorms, something that's not predicted well, not talked about much, not understood very well still to this date. But with monsoonal moisture in the mid part of the atmosphere on the west coast, you can also get thunderstorms all the way to the coast, over the cold water, and in the valleys. Now, the thunderstorms over the mountains and deserts, those will mean business. Flash flooding, severe weather, quite possible. What kind of temperatures are we expecting? We're talking about record highs, even for July across the Great Basin and the high deserts. So places like Salt Lake City, for example. Now, what about the Central Valley of California? Well, they're going to see it later. So the Great Basin first really heats up this weekend into next week, and then the California portion, the Central Valley, heats up next week when we could see hundreds, well over 100 in the Central Valley. Now, for the Southern California deserts, you're the opposite. So how can that be? Well, you're going to have your hottest temperatures around 115 this week, and you're going to actually cool down, relatively speaking, because of moisture. Moisture that comes up in the low levels, those are dewpoint temperatures. That's what makes you feel sticky, muggy, warm nights, uncomfortable, can't cool off. That'll actually shave the temperatures even though it gets muggy. So despite when you hear people say, well, it's 95 degrees and 100% humidity, that's not possible. That would be rainy conditions. What your body's really feeling is the dew point temperatures. So those will actually shave the temperatures off in the Southern California deserts in the Southwest, but it's going to be muggy, warmer nights, and of course the monsoon thunderstorms. Okay, let's take a look at recent trends. So no coincidence, right? So the heat dome is going to set up over the Great Basin, over Salt Lake City, over Wyoming, over Denver, and it's going to sit there for a couple weeks. That is the area that has been the warmest since last October. Yes, all winter. Stands out here like a sore thumb. Now, what about precipitation? Where has it been wet? Where has it been dry? Well, we've been drier than even normal for the Great Basin, the Rockies, and the West, as shown here over the past couple months. Now, where it's been really wet is where I got that arrow pointed, is the southeast, the Gulf Coast area. The Mid-Atlantic region, where we saw some recent major flooding, has actually been drier than normal, except for northern New England. So we've had a lot of shift in the weather, and now it's shifting to the west for the heaviest widespread precipitation. And that's about the time we see it in July, but the magnitude of this weather pattern is greater than normal. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, we can see there's going to be an anomaly for the next week over the west, and especially the Great Basin and the Rockies, the bright red shaded area. Now, the East Coast remains hot, but notice how they cool down in week 2. Towards the second part of July, you start seeing blue shaded over the Northeast. Now, precipitation really wet in the Mid-Atlantic region. Yes, of course, and that's been ongoing. But look at the west. You start seeing a large area of green, and that's kind of hard to do, all the way up into Canada and even into the Pacific Northwest. So the green shaded means significant monsoon, heavy rain from those thunderstorms. Now, does this end? Well, the heat wave starts to break down because it fills up with moisture over the west, and the heat dome actually starts to shift south and west over California. So part of it goes up into Canada, and then part reforms over California as we get to late July, early August. And precipitation, well, it shifts up north as well with that upper ridge into Canada. And then we get back to more normal, isolated, widely scattered thunderstorm activity across the west, late July and early August. So what happens and how does this happen? So right now we have a very flat weather pattern. So the big heat dome and ridge is broken down. It's moved off in the Atlantic region. Okay, so the southeast catching a break even though it's still hot in the 90s. Across the west, it's also a flat. So the jet stream's going west to east, zonal. Nothing significant going on. Precipitation hugging along that black line, especially thunderstorms moving all the way to New York City. Now, once we get into this weekend, the heat dome starts to form over Southern California, quickly shifts east. It likes the desert. The heat off the desert basically allows it to grow and strengthen with time. And it becomes really strong, maybe record-breaking strong over the Great Basin. Big heat dome upper ridge of hot air. And that will allow for lots of sunshine and also those record hot temperatures as we go into this weekend and next week. Now, it doesn't go anywhere, even though it does shift to the east over the Rockies and the Western Plains. But look how large it is. It's massive. And that's what I mean by it's not just your ordinary ridge, not just your normal four corners high. It's shifted further north and it's broader. Now, this starts to allow that monsoonal flow this weekend and early next week, right up into California, into Oregon. And yes, this is a player. This L in the Eastern Pacific, that allows the sandwich or the squeeze of the atmosphere and focuses the moisture coming up from Mexico and Texas all the way across the Baja into the Pacific Northwest, as shown here. That's the ring of fire. We got to watch that area for potential, not just mountain thunderstorms, not just desert thunderstorms, but also elevated thunderstorms that can occur anywhere. And those can be a fire weather threat, even though they're accompanied by heavy rain. Now, the upper ridge holds even into mid-July, as shown here. So the pattern really breaks down and becomes stuck, cooling in the northeast, as shown here. As we get into later in the period, towards July 17, 18, 20th, really no change. Especially initially where the upper ridge is firmly in place around July 17th and 18th. Big, massive flow, monsoonal flow out of Mexico as shown here. The cool air stays to the northeast. Now, when we get later in the month, we do see a little change in the weather pattern, but it's just shrinking a little bit, not so severe, because all that moisture, all those dew point temperatures, all that mid-level atmospheric monsoonal tropical moisture is feeding into this upper ridge. So now, no longer is it just feeding off of the dry, hot desert ground. That ground is becoming wet, and the whole column of the atmosphere is becoming moist. We call that water vapor, and it's not saturated, but it's causing some slight cooling, and so that heat dome is starting to shrink. We hope you enjoyed this. Now, since this is a serious heat wave, we just went through one in the southeast and mid-Atlantic region. This is something to take serious in terms of the heat risk across the west. And even when temperatures start to lower a little bit, we're going to become more muggy. That means dew point temperatures higher. That means more uncomfortable, warmer nights. And you can see how it kind of spirals out of control and becomes more of an impact. Now, thunderstorms are going to be significant from the west coast all the way through the Great Basin and Rockies. I expect to see numerous areas with flash flooding and also a threat for lightning starts. And the heat alone initially is going to be a major problem for fire weather. So hopefully we can bring in that humidity, weaken this heat dome as we get towards the end of July and suppress some of that wildfire activity. You can find out information about this and more on the Tardy blog. We posted about this heat wave several days ago. We're also on TikTok, YouTube, where we did videos several days ago about this heat wave and the monsoonal flow. And then more real-time information on Threads and X. All right, everyone, stay safe this July. Prepare for heat wave and monsoonal thunderstorms.